Willis.
Hi, Dad.
How was the movie?
He kissed her in the balcony. Yes.
I bet you're a whipped cream man, too,
Yeah.
huh? The sweetest, the gooeyest, the stickiest with cream I think I've ever made.
Everything was producer ran. You know, they own the exec producers. If they own the show, they own the show. See, no one could tell them what to do with it, you know? And we got hate mail from both sides. That's just how it was. You know, they didn't want to see us hugging a white guy and saying, hey, we love you. They didn't want to see any of that. And the white people did not want us, you know, hugging them, their people.
After decades of silence, Todd Bridges is finally ready to reveal the most disturbing secrets from the set of Diff'rent Strokes. From at the hands of those who were supposed to protect him.
Yeah, well, he was a family friend who became a publicist who did that, so, yeah.
To a devastating crack addiction that nearly killed him.
When the show ended, it had nothing to do with that I wasn't working, because I didn't want to work anymore for a while. I was planning on traveling around. It happened to when I found out my accountants, that's when I found out my accountants had stole, you know, almost $3-something million.
To being the last survivor of a cast destroyed by fame.
Crazy, right? Who would have ever thought that? No one would have ever thought that I'd be the last one, you know, but God wants me here, I'm healthy, and God wants me here.
This is the story they never wanted you to know. Kim Fields has known Todd Bridges for decades. From their early years in Hollywood to watching their peers disappear one by one, she's seen firsthand the pain he carries.
When we did live in front of a studio audience, and they did Diff'rent Strokes and Facts of Life, and when they had us come out, you know, the original cast members at the end, and they introduced the cast of they introduced the cast of Diff'rent Strokes, and Todd was the only one that came out. Because I know, because I was there, I lived it with him, and that of everybody, that's literally the last man standing. I went behind those audience bleachers and I cried like I was being beaten with a skillet. I mean, I could not hold it in because I know what it took for him to be able to walk through the remake of that door. So, yeah, it's hard. And so, yeah, it motivated me. Yeah. I'd be lying if I didn't say when I went to visit Todd down at LA County that there wasn't a part of me going, I love you, bro, but this ain't gonna be me.
Todd Bridges was one of Hollywood's brightest young stars.
I thought the business was something wonderful. I mean, I still think it's something wonderful, but I thought it was a little more different than the way that I've seen it today.
Todd Bridges was one of Hollywood's brightest young stars, but before he became a household name, he was just a kid with a dream. Born in 1965 in San Francisco, Todd grew up surrounded by entertainment. His mother, Betty Bridges, wasn't just any mom. She was an acting coach who trained some of the biggest names in Hollywood. That meant Todd was always around actors, rehearsals, and auditions.
My mom was in the business first, and then my dad was a longshoreman for a bunch of years.
Okay. And, like, did your mom train a bunch of female actresses?
Yeah, Nia Long,
right.
Regina King,
right.
My friend who passed away, Lamont Bentley,
Sanaa Lathan?
Shania Lathan, yep.
Yeah.
She trained all those people. She trained them and she trained like Regina and Nia, a bunch of kids for like years and years without even getting paid. She just trained them.
Wow.
And she ended up managing them later on, but she didn't get paid in the beginning. She just trained them. Originally what would happen was if you wanted to be in show business, you had to come through my mom and my dad because there was no other way for us to get through at the time. It was very difficult.
With his mom's guidance, Todd started landing roles, while most kids were still figuring out their ABCs. His first big break came with appearances on hit TV shows like Barney Miller, Little House on the Prairie, and Roots. He wasn't just playing small parts. People noticed his talent, and soon, doors started opening.
First TV role was Streets of San Francisco with Carl Malden.
Oh, I remember that show.
Yeah, and Michael Douglas, yeah.
Okay. But at age 10, you got a role in Barney Miller.
Yes.
Then came Diff'rent Strokes, and everything changed. In 1978, Todd was cast as Willis Jackson, the older brother of Gary Coleman's Arnold. The show followed two black brothers from Harlem who were adopted by a wealthy white businessman, and it was an instant hit. America fell in love with Todd and Gary's on-screen chemistry, and the phrase, "What you talking about, Willis?" became one of the most famous catchphrases in TV history.
Arnold, to collect unemployment, you gotta not be working at what you're working at before you stop working. What you talking about, Willis?
Todd went from being a regular kid to one of the most recognizable faces on television almost overnight. His life became a whirlwind of press interviews, red carpets, and fan encounters. Wherever he went, people stopped him for autographs, and magazines put his face on their covers. He was living every young actor's dream, but with fame came pressure. Todd was young, and suddenly he had the weight of an entire TV show and a massive audience on his shoulders. He wasn't just acting, he was working long hours, doing interviews, and trying to keep up with school, all while dealing with the reality of growing up in Hollywood. And that is when the cracks started showing.
When did it start to go sour for you?
Well, it's when I lost my self-esteem and I lost my dignity inside of myself, and I lost my I lost myself.
While Diff'rent Strokes had millions of viewers laughing every week, Todd Bridges was living a completely different reality behind the scenes. Hollywood looked glamorous from the outside, but for young stars like Todd, it was anything but. Child actors were thrown into an industry that cared more about making money than protecting them. The pressure to be perfect, to always perform, and to never show weakness was overwhelming. Todd wasn't just growing up on screen. He was growing up in a world that didn't care about his well-being.
Anybody can be charged with things, but if you committed the crime, you'll be convicted. And I haven't been convicted.
Why was Todd Bridges charged then? Why were you singled out?
I was in the wrong place at the wrong time.
And behind those closed doors, some of the worst things imaginable were happening. In his 2010 memoir, Killing Willis, Todd revealed the horrific truth he had kept hidden for years. From age 11, he had been essayed by his publicist and manager, someone his family trusted, someone who was supposed to protect him.
Yeah, well, he was a family friend who became a publicist who did that, so. Yeah.
The abuse began when Todd was just 11 years old, continued for years, and destroyed his sense of self-worth and safety just as he was entering the spotlight on Diff'rent Strokes. The psychological damage was devastating. Todd's abuser manipulated him into believing that what was happening was normal in the industry, warping his understanding of relationships, trust, and his own value as a person, not just as a commodity for Hollywood. What makes this story even more tragic is that Todd felt he had nowhere to turn. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, there were virtually no protections in place for child actors, no studio teachers monitoring well-being, no psychological support, and no cultural understanding of the unique pressures these children faced. While America was laughing at Willis and Arnold's antics, the real Todd Bridges was silently suffering, carrying a burden no child should ever have to bear. If you search Diff'rent Strokes online today, you'll inevitably find articles about the Diff'rent Strokes curse. It's become shorthand for the tragic fates that befell the show's young stars. But what the public often misses is that there was no supernatural curse, just a toxic industry that chewed up young talent and spat them out broken. For Todd, the transition from beloved child star to troubled adult began while still filming the show. As he entered his teenage years, the psychological damage from his abuse, combined with the pressures of fame, led him down a destructive path. By 16, Todd was experimenting with marijuana. By 20, he had graduated, and by the time Diff'rent Strokes was ending its run in 1986, he was developing a serious crack cocaine addiction.
When the show ended, it had nothing to do with that I wasn't working, because I didn't want to work anymore for a while. I was planning on traveling around. It happened to when I found out my accountants. That's when I found out my accountants had stole, almost $3-something million.
Every day was filled with pain for Todd. The cocaine numbed that pain temporarily, making him feel powerful when he truly felt powerless. But this temporary escape was leading him down a path of destruction that would nearly cost him everything. But Todd wasn't the only cast member struggling. The so-called curse was hitting everyone. Dana Plato, who played Kimberly Drummond, was fired from the show in its final seasons when she became pregnant at 18.
She got fired because she was pregnant.
Oh.
That's why she got fired. That's the
know that.
real reason why she got fired.
Wow.
Because they couldn't have, back in those days, an unwed woman pregnant. They couldn't have it. Like today, it'd be like, no big deal. We just shoot around you. We just add in the show. Not back then.
Cut off from her steady income and struggling to find new roles, Dana's life spiraled into chaos. She struggled with addiction, poverty, and desperation. In 1991, she robbed a video store with a pellet gun, seeking just $164. The headlines were merciless. Diff'rent Strokes star hits rock bottom. In 1999, at just 34 years old, Dana died of an overdose of painkillers and Valium. The medical examiner ruled it suicide. Her son Tyler would also take his own life in 2010, just 11 years later, almost to the day of his mother's death.
Some people are saying that she died of suicide. Other people are saying there was a drug overdose.
Accidental. Yeah.
It was accidental drug overdose?
Then there was Gary Coleman, who played Arnold Jackson, the character who made "What you talking about, Willis?" a national catchphrase.
What you talking about, Willis?
Gary's troubles were different, but equally devastating. Born with a congenital kidney disease that stunted his growth and required multiple transplants, Gary's health problems were complicated by financial exploitation. In 1989, he sued his parents and business advisor for misappropriating his $3.8 million trust fund. Though he won a $1.28 million settlement, he was forced to work as a security guard and filed for bankruptcy in 1999. Gary's adult life was marked by legal troubles, domestic disputes, and continued health problems. In 2010, he died after suffering a brain hemorrhage following a fall at his home. He was just 42 years old.
Now to our other top story. Gary Coleman was taken off life support this afternoon at Utah Valley Regional Medical Center with family and friends at his side.
Conrad Bain, who played adoptive father Philip Drummond, lived a longer and more stable life, but passed away in 2013 at age 89. And so, Todd Bridges, once the teenage heartthrob of American television, found himself the last survivor of the show's core cast. The weight of carrying their collective stories fell squarely on his shoulders.
Crazy, right? Who would have ever thought that? No one would have ever thought that I'd be the last one. But God wants me here. I'm healthy and God wants me here.
As Diff'rent Strokes came to an end in 1986, Todd's personal demons were just beginning to take full control. His addiction to crack cocaine intensified, and his life spiraled into a cycle of drugs, crime, and arrests that would dominate headlines throughout the late 1980s and early 1990s. In 1989, Todd faced his darkest hour when he was arrested and charged with the attempted murder of a drug dealer. He spent 8 months in jail awaiting trial before being acquitted of all charges.
Jail.
But Bridges did land in the Los Angeles County Jail. He has pleaded not guilty to a charge of first-degree attempted murder.
He was facing a life sentence for something he maintained he didn't do: being in the wrong place at the wrong time, associating with the wrong people because of his addiction. Though acquitted of the most serious charges, Todd's legal troubles continued. Between 1983 and 1993, he would be arrested multiple times for offenses ranging from carrying a concealed weapon to drug possession. The public's perception of Todd completely transformed. He went from being Willis Jackson, the lovable big brother on America's favorite sitcom, to being portrayed as a violent criminal. The media feasted on his downfall, often with racist undertones that weren't applied to white child stars who struggled with similar issues. Todd later reflected on how he became the poster child for fallen child stars, with the added burden of racial bias in how the media portrayed his struggles compared to white former child actors with similar problems. By the early 1990s, Todd had hit rock bottom. Homeless at times, paranoid, and in the grip of severe addiction, he had lost everything. his money, his reputation, and nearly his life. His entire existence revolved around getting high. Acting, family, and other priorities had completely disappeared from his mind, replaced by an all-consuming addiction to crack. In February 1993, Todd Bridges reached the turning point that would ultimately save his life. After years of failed attempts at sobriety, something finally clicked. Looking in the mirror one day, Todd no longer recognized himself. He saw what drugs had done to him, what he had become, and realized that if he didn't stop immediately, death was inevitable. With the help of his friend Corey Feldman, another former child star who understood the unique pressures Todd had faced, he entered treatment one final time. This time, it worked. Todd's recovery wasn't just about giving up drugs. It was about facing the root causes of his addiction: the childhood abuse he had suffered, the pressures of early fame, and the racial discrimination he had experienced in Hollywood. For the first time, Todd began to separate himself from Willis Jackson, the character that had both made him famous and trapped him in the public imagination. He had to kill Willis to save Todd. Sobriety gave Todd clarity about the exploitative nature of child stardom. He began speaking out about the lack of protections for young actors in Hollywood and the particular vulnerabilities of child stars. Todd began advocating for mandatory therapy for child actors, independent professionals whose only job would be protecting the mental health of young performers, separate from production companies, parents, and managers who might have conflicting interests. As the years passed and Todd established himself in recovery, tragedy continued to strike his former castmates. The deaths of Dana Plato in 1999 and Gary Coleman in 2010 left Todd as the sole surviving child star from Diff'rent Strokes. Todd often wonders why he survived when the others didn't. Was it luck? Was it because he finally got the help he needed? Whatever the reason, he feels obligated to speak the truth about what they all experienced. Being the last witness to something that destroyed so many lives requires an extraordinary strength that most people will never understand. Because while Diff'rent Strokes was known primarily as a family comedy, the show occasionally ventured into extremely dark territory with very special episodes that addressed serious social issues.
Hello, I'm Conrad Bain. Tonight on Diff'rent Strokes, we're starting a special two-part show on a very sensitive and important subject.
None was more controversial than the two-part episode titled The Bicycle Man, which aired in 1983. The episode dealt with child, a subject virtually never discussed on primetime television at that time, let alone in a sitcom.
Yes.
I bet you're a whipped cream man, too.
Yeah.
The sweetest, the gooeyest, the stickiest with cream I think I've ever made.
In the episode, Arnold and his friend Dudley are groomed by a local bicycle shop owner who shows them pornography and attempts to photograph them without their shirts. The gravity of the subject matter stood in contrast to the show's typical light comedy. What makes this episode particularly haunting in retrospect is that Todd Bridges was filming these scenes while still processing his own real-life abuse. The writers, producers, and even his castmates had no idea that their colleague was silently reliving his own trauma through this storyline. Reading the script made Todd physically ill, as he was essentially acting out a version of what had happened to him personally, complete with a laugh track. Yet he couldn't tell anyone why it was affecting him so deeply. The episode received both criticism for addressing such a sensitive topic in a sitcom format and praise for bringing awareness to child predators. But for Todd, it represented yet another way that Hollywood inadvertently forced him to suppress his own pain for the sake of entertainment. Other controversial episodes included storylines about racism, drug use, alcoholism, and kidnapping. Heavy topics that the young cast had to portray while dealing with their own developing understanding of the world. The public perception of Diff'rent Strokes was of a happy, functional television family. But behind the scenes, tensions sometimes ran high. particularly as the child actors grew older and began to chafe against the limitations of their roles. Gary Coleman, in particular, grew increasingly frustrated as the show progressed. Despite being a teenager by the final seasons, he was still forced to act and dress like a small child because the producers wanted to maintain his character's cute, precocious image. Gary was incredibly intelligent and keenly aware of his exploitation, but like all the child actors on the show, he was trapped in a system with few options. There were also ongoing issues with compensation. Despite being the stars of one of television's most popular shows, the child actors on Diff'rent Strokes were not paid nearly what they were worth, especially compared to adult actors on comparable hit shows. The racial dynamics on set were also complex. Todd experienced racism, both within the industry and from some viewers who resented seeing black children being raised by a white father on television. The production received hate mail from viewers objecting to the portrayal of black kids being raised by a white man. Simultaneously, industry insiders viewed the inclusion of black children on television as merely a passing trend rather than meaningful progress. For Todd, navigating these racial dynamics while also dealing with the aftermath of and the onset of addiction created a perfect storm of stress and confusion during his formative years. In the years following his recovery, Todd Bridges has worked steadily to rebuild his life and career. Though he never again achieved the level of fame he had with Diff'rent Strokes, he has appeared in numerous television shows and films, including roles in Everybody Hates Chris, Smallville, and as a commentator on World's Dumbest. More importantly, Todd found purpose in sharing his story to help others. His 2010 memoir, Killing Willis, detailed his journey from abuse and addiction to recovery, and he has become an outspoken advocate for child actor protections and addiction recovery resources. Todd's motivation for sharing his painful story is to prevent others from following the same destructive path. Finding meaning in his suffering has helped him make peace with his past. Todd has also rebuilt his personal life. As a father, he has been determined to provide the stability and protection he himself lacked as a child. He has been open about breaking the cycle of trauma that affected his own childhood. Perhaps most remarkably, Todd has found forgiveness, both for those who harmed him and for himself. After decades of anger and self-destruction, he speaks now with a wisdom and compassion that can only come from walking through fire and surviving. Letting go of hatred was essential for Todd's healing process, as he recognized that holding on to resentment was just another form of self-destruction.
So what's next for you? What are you working on now?
Right now, I have something really big that I can't say yet. It's about to become, it's gonna be really good for a lot of people. Despite the tragedies that befell its cast, Diff'rent Strokes remains an important part of television history. It was one of the first shows to feature a black family in a predominantly white setting, addressing issues of race, class, and adoption with a blend of humor and occasional seriousness that was groundbreaking for its time. The show tackled subjects that many family sitcoms avoided, including racism, drug use, child predators, and economic inequality. While some of these very special episodes may seem heavy-handed by today's standards, they opened important conversations in American living rooms. For Todd Bridges, the legacy of the show is complex. It gave him opportunities and platform he might never have had otherwise. It made him a household name and a role model for many young black viewers who rarely saw themselves represented on television. But it also thrust him into a system that failed to protect him, exposed him to exploitation and abuse, and pigeonholed him in ways that made transitioning to adult roles nearly impossible. The show provided tremendous opportunities, but also took an enormous toll. While Todd appreciates what Diff'rent Strokes gave him, he wishes there had been more protections in place for the child actors. The story of Diff'rent Strokes and Todd Bridges is one of both darkness and light. It reveals the shadow side of fame, especially child fame, and the devastating consequences of an industry that prioritizes profit over people's well-being. But it's also a story of resilience.
Todd Bridges could have become just another tragic headline, another fallen child star statistic. Instead, he fought his way back from the brink, confronted his past, and transformed his pain into purpose. As the last man standing from one of television's most beloved and ultimately most cursed shows, Todd carries the memories of those who didn't make it. Gary Coleman, Dana Plato, Conrad Bain. He carries the weight of telling their stories honestly, of ensuring that the truth about what happened behind those studio doors isn't forgotten. In the end, Todd Bridges' greatest achievement isn't that he survived Diff'rent Strokes and its aftermath. It's that he found a way to thrive despite it, to kill Willis, as he says, and save Todd. Anyway, that's it for this video, folks. Bye.